Today we're welcoming back Dave Aronberg, state attorney down in Palm Beach County, former state legislator. I know him from back in my Palm Beach Post days. Stick with us. We're going to talk about President Donald Trump's trial tribulations. We'll talk about protests on campus and whether Florida is in play for Dems or not. You might be surprised to hear what he has to say about that.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I want to jump right in because I know you don't have a lot of time and I've got a lot of questions that I would love to ask you. And so let's just dig right in. Dave Aronberg, state attorney. What circuit is this?
15th.
15th. How could I forget? Because I used to be DKPB, right? DKPB.
Dara Cam of Palm Beach. You were one of the good ones at the Palm Beach Post.
I was a postie, and we miss you up here, former Senator Dave Aronberg. And you're on your way out, right? Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. It's great to be back with you, Dara. I am in my last term, my last year. Got about 8 months left, and then I'm going to try a new chapter.
Oh, are you going to give us any hints as to what we can look forward to?
Well, I'm going to do some private sector work, and I want to see also where the TV and streaming things go. I've been doing more of that, and I just
because you're a regular on Morning Joe. He's a frequent guest of the show, by the way, I must say, and you're a regular on Morning Joe, and you're really popular.
Well, thank you. I hope I'm popular. It's really nice of you to say. I don't get a lot of feedback, so that means a lot to hear you say that, and I love doing it. And they're really they've been great to me on Morning Joe and on MSNBC. And I'd like to see where it goes because I really enjoy getting the chance to break through the misinformation out there and also take complex legal issues and break them down for people because there's too much of a lack of transparency in our criminal justice system. We see that in New York where they don't even allow cameras in the courtroom. Right.
I mean, we're having to look at these drawings. I mean, thank goodness there's artists in there drawing, but that is like, you used to be a federal prosecutor, right? Did you work for the feds?
No, I was a state prosecutor.
I'm sorry. Jeez, I'm screwing up left, right, and center here this morning. Well, this is a little bone I have to pick with the federal court system where you can't, I have a special order at the Northern District allowing me to bring my phone into the courtroom because it is a medical device. But other than that, you're not allowed to bring your phone into federal courtrooms, and some down there, I think you can use computers, but it just seems like really a throwback.
The federal government and just a few states like New York, they're back in the 20th century where they just don't allow any communications devices. And I think that hurts the cause of justice because justice depends on people believing in it and respecting it. And if people don't believe in it because they can't see it, then that's a problem.
Let's talk about some of what's going on in the court system. I had a really fun story yesterday, about it involved Donkey Kong and Pac-Man, and whether somebody who records a phone call outside of Florida secretly records a phone call with someone who is in Florida is violating the state law. And I'm not going to ask you to weigh in on that unless you want to, but it was the two people who were involved in these calls. One of them is a very well-known arcade champion, Billy Mitchell, who lives in Hollywood, and his family.
Billy Mitchell?
Yes.
Or Billy Rubin. Billy Mitchell.
No, Billy Mitchell, his family owns Ricky's Wings, the Ricky's, the chicken wing restaurant. But anyways, I wrote about that yesterday. It was very interesting, and it seems like a very simple question, but there was a very interesting discussion among the justices. I highly recommend that you watch that. Sadly, there was no mention of Donkey Kong or Pac-Man. But anyway, that was what I spent my day doing yesterday. Let's talk about President Trump's cases. You, I'm sure, are following this, as are most of us. The Florida case was put on hold about the documents. It was put on hold indefinitely, I guess. Can you give us a little insight into what's going on in New York and Florida with President Trump's lawsuits?
Sure. You have Judge Aileen Cannon, who has been slow walking this case, and I'm not imputing nefarious intentions. I'm just saying she's inexperienced and she's never had a classified documents case before. And so she is taking her time. She's giving Trump every benefit of the doubt with delays and with hearings on issues that should not have hearings. Like, for example, Trump wants to include the intelligence agencies as part of the prosecution. So he wants the judge to declare that the deep state is part of Jack Smith's prosecution team. So now he can get more documents from all these national security agencies. It's a ridiculous request. And every other judge would say, no, denied, or at the very least would ask for pleadings and then deny it on the written pleadings. But no, Judge Cannon has set a 3-day hearing in late June for this. And so this is why you see this case going so long and being delayed, because she has been over backwards to give every possible benefit of the doubt to
She's a Trump
Trump
appointee too, I think.
She is, and I am not going to go that far to say she's doing it to benefit the person who appointed her to the bench. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that.
Oh, well, you can apply, but but she also is sitting in a satellite courthouse by herself in Fort Pierce, where she has no guidance or senior judge there to help her through a complex case. Her law clerks have come and gone, so there's been turnover there. So this is all part of the reason why there's been such a delay. So because of that, it is no surprise that just the other day she said that the trial will be postponed indefinitely past the election. And I responded by saying, that's a good thing for Jack Smith. And you know why, Dara? It's a good thing for Jack Smith. People were surprised that I said that.
Yes, I am surprised. Tell us why. Why is that a good thing for Jack Smith?
It's because this case was never going to be heard before the election. Once Aileen Cannon was appointed, this case was never going before the election, but yet it was set to go on May 20th. That was an unrealistic date. And my fear was not that she would postpone it indefinitely. It was that she would postpone it to late summer, fall, where, again, it'd be unrealistic. It was never going to go, but it would serve as a blockade, an obstacle, if you will, to the case that could go, the election interference case in D.C. If the Supreme Court gives that the green light, and we'll see what happens, then it'll be up to Judge Chutkan to set it. But if there's this Mar-a-Lago documents case set on the calendar for the summer, for the fall, that makes it even less likely for the one case that actually could be heard to go to trial with a judge who wants it to go to trial, unlike Judge Cannon, who has been slow walking it. And any other date that she mentioned or she set before the election would be an unrealistic date. And so that's why I say she actually did Jack Smith a solid. She got rid of any date. It means one less obstacle, one less headache for Judge Chutkan and Jack Smith as they tried to do some justice before the election.
I mean, who would have thought that we would have a presidential candidate, a former president, who's got all of these cases against him, is involved in all of this litigation, and yet, his popularity seems to be stronger than ever.
Well, it's really from his base. His base gets riled up for it. That was not surprising. I don't think you see him any more popular amongst independents. But as far
so
as
his popularity isn't growing. It's not growing, but it isn't diminishing.
It's energizing his base, but they're always going to be energized. I mean, you can't persuade the unpersuadable. They thrive on grievance and martyrdom. That's what this is about. Trump plays into that, and he knows how to play these folks. As far as the folks who are undecided, and they are relatively low information voters, And this type of stuff may or may not influence them. We don't know. But as far as thinking that these trials are helping Trump, they only help him in the primary. They help him with his base, but they don't help with the swing voters, especially women in suburbs who are going to determine this election. They've got to be looking at this hush money trial, this election interference trial, and be aghast at what they're hearing.
It's a little creepy. I mean, I got to say, it's a little, I don't want to get into the details of what we heard Stormy Daniels say yesterday, but look, and I'm no prude, but it was a little, there was a sleaze factor there, I felt.
It's dirty. And Stormy Daniels and prosecutors need to be careful about going too far, make it too salacious, because that could engender sympathy for Trump. I mean, really, there was no need to talk about how he was getting spanked by the magazine. That's too lurid.
See, you went there. I didn't.
Yeah, well, I want to give an example of what parts I thought, for example, they didn't need to go. And as a prosecutor, I thought that was unnecessary. But there is a reason why they did go into detail. Number one, she had to show that her story was true because Trump has denied it. The defense lawyers said it wasn't true, so she had to explain, well, from the color of the tile to what's in his toiletry bag, here's why you should believe me. And number two, also it's important for the jury to know why Trump would pay $130,000 to her and $420,000 to Michael Cohen.
It speaks to his sense of there was a need to suppress this story from being released.
Well, and now the jurors know better than anyone else why Trump was so concerned about this story being heard by the public, because now they heard it and you can't unhear it. It's awful, and it would have, I think, changed minds before the election, in a very tight election. So that's why he did what he did. So now prosecutors have established, to me, so far with all the evidence, not just Stormy Daniels, but everyone who came before her, that Trump was involved in the hush money scheme. He helped plan it. He knew all about the repayments to Michael Cohen because he pays attention to everything. He knew it was about the election. That's the whole intent here, was to protect his candidacy, not to protect his wife. The only piece of the puzzle that's missing is, can you still tie him more directly to the falsification of the business records, the act of labeling these hush money reimbursements as legal fees? And I think that's where Michael Cohen is going to come into play. He's going to provide direct evidence. And so the prosecution up to this point is providing circumstantial evidence to buttress the upcoming testimony by Michael Cohen.
Of course, he's a convicted felon now, right? So is that going to affect the jury's, ability to trust him or believe what he says?
That's Trump's best remaining defense, is to tell the jury, you can't believe this guy. He's a convicted perjurer. He's a convicted felon, and he's not likable. So reject everything he says. And if you reject what he says, this case falls apart. That's his best last defense. Problem is the prosecution has spent a lot of time and energy in pre-butting Michael Cohen's testimony to show corroboration. So they're going to tell the jury, members of the jury, you may not like Michael Cohen, you may want to disbelieve him, but we proved that what he's saying now is true based on all the other witnesses. Everyone cannot be lying. And so I think that's why this case is going really well for prosecutors. And if Donald Trump wants to tell his side of the story, he can testify, but he's not going to do so.
I wanted to ask you about what you say is sort of, I think I got this sense that you think the best case is Jack Smith's case, the insurrection case. Tell us what's in store for us there and how that's going to play out, and maybe even a timeline for that.
The best case for prosecutors is the Mar-a-Lago documents case. They've got Trump dead to rights there. Trump has no defense. But when Judge Cannon got assigned to the case randomly, it meant that this case was not going to be heard before the election. But the best case against Trump that could be heard before the election is the D.C. election interference case. In fact, there are only two cases that could be heard before the election, that one in D.C. and this one in New York. I don't think the New York case is a weak case. It's just the least strong of the four hovering over Trump. But Jack Smith has a good case against Trump. And unlike the New York case, that one really does resonate with the American public because it involves January 6th. We all saw it. We were all disgusted by it. And it reminds voters about it. So it'll be up to the Supreme Court whether or not that case could go. My point is that now that the Mar-a-Lago documents case is out of the picture, it makes it a little more likely that it goes than it was before Judge Cannon made her decision.
We have a new email address, and we'd love to hear from you. To reach us and give us your input, tell us what you'd like to hear. Tell us what you thought about what you already heard. Tell us how fabulous we are. Join the Deeper Divas team. Send an email to podcasts@e.newsserviceflorida.com. That's podcasts@e.newsserviceflorida.com. And I promise I will read everyone. Okay, so who's going to win in November?
Politically?
Yes.
In the election?
Yes.
I still believe that President Biden wins. And the reason why, and remember, it's funny, when you had me on your show,
Yes.
like before the midterms,
yes.
and I was a contrarian. Everyone said it's going to be a red wave. I said no. In
yes.
fact, Democrats are going to pick up a seat in the Senate. And I was right.
You were right. You were right.
I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so. So, but I'm not always right. And sometimes I will choose with my heart rather than my head. But I still believe that based on what we've seen in every special election since the Dobbs decision, the decision to overturn Roe versus Wade, that we've seen overperformance by Democrats. Now, why will that change when the person who's most responsible for the overturning of Roe versus Wade is himself on the ballot in November? So I still believe that Joe Biden wins. And I think that we could thank the Supreme Court for that. Their overturning Roe versus Wade has changed the course of history. It's motivated women and their allies to vote on reproductive rights. It is a difference maker. And I think that's what's going to happen. But, a lot can happen between now and then. There could be October surprises. But for now, I'm sticking with my original prediction.
Okay, well, we'll come back and, I'm not going to bet against you on that. I do think I've talked to a lot of people, Republicans and Democrats, since Dobbs, and with Florida's 6-week abortion ban going into effect. I don't personally. I'd like to ask you where you come in on this. Is Florida really in play for Democrats? Is for Joe Biden?
No, I don't think.
Okay, I agree. I agree.
No, I don't think so. Now, could the abortion referendum and the marijuana referendum help Democrats in down ticket races?
Yep.
Possibly. I mean,
I think the abortion more than the marijuana. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, marijuana ballot initiatives doesn't seem to help on races other than marijuana referendums. Also, Florida has a long history of passing progressive referenda at the same time voting for conservative Republicans who are on the ballot.
We are so weird. We are right? Florida.
Yeah, this happens over and over again. You can see the history from the class size initiative, which Jeb Bush opposed, and then he got reelected along with the passing of that initiative, to universal pre-K, to anti-gerrymandering initiatives. I mean,
felons voting, restoring the right to vote.
Restating, I mean, really, yeah, keep it going, right?
Right.
It all passes, even with 60% of the vote. But we'll see whether other. Just that the Democratic Party needs to rebuild before we can elect candidates statewide. And I think Nikki Fried's doing a really good job, but you're starting from the bottom. And I think she is doing what she can. It is a slow build. I mean, now there are 1 million more Republicans in the state of Florida than Democrats. The one silver lining I would give to my fellow Democrats throughout the state is that as we have attracted many MAGA voters into our state from other states, it's made those other states bluer. And I think that's one of the reasons why you saw the red wave become a red trickle. I think when you come from Michigan and you flood into Florida with, red voters from blue states, it does have the effect of making those blue states bluer.
So it's kind of like a crimson suck here in Florida. That's interesting. That's interesting. I want to, do you have any insights or predictions about who we might see running statewide in 2026?
Well, it won't be me, but as far as others, Jason Pizzo according to reports, is running for governor.
Mm-hmm.
Chevron Jones said he was running for governor, but I've heard other things lately that he's not. But as far as others, we'll see. You could have the potential surprise candidate, someone with resources and money. I mean, who could make a go out of it.
Pizzo should run for AG.
I hear that, and I think he'd make a good AG. I think the issue is that if you're a guy with substantial resources,
yes, that's true.
Pizzo has.
He can self-fund.
May not want to run in a down ticket race where you're dependent on the top of the ticket to win.
He can self-fund for sure.
Right. So yeah, if it's not Pizzo, who else do we have for the top of the ticket? The Rock is not going to come and bail us out here. So are there other names that you're hearing?
Statewide, I'm hearing Nikki Fried for governor again. I heard Fentress Driscoll for governor. That was a couple months ago. I'm not sure where they are on that. Obviously money is the big issue for a statewide race in Florida. I mean, they're spending 7 figures on Senate races here, state Senate races here. So
it's an uphill climb for any Democrat. Respect to those who want to take that plunge. Nikki has run statewide. She's got name ID, and so that helps her in a state with we have 10 media markets. But it's going to be difficult. You have to raise the money, and you have to be able to overcome the 1 million voter disadvantage. I think if Matt Gaetz is the nominee for the Republicans, that gives Democrats a better shot. But I keep thinking that the Republican nominee for governor is going to be Casey DeSantis, and I think she'd be hard to beat.
Do you really think that?
I do. I think the big obstacle to Casey winning the nomination is Donald Trump. Trump, hates DeSantis.
Right.
But Trump met with DeSantis to try to cut a deal, try to get some of DeSantis's fundraising. And we'll see where that goes. But there's going to be
she's kind of the shadow governor now, right? I mean, she's his closest advisor.
Yeah. And yes, she's also more personable than he is and telegenic. And but we've never elected a woman governor before. Is that a barrier? Is that a glass ceiling that will remain in Florida?
No.
Does that matter in the Republican primary where you're going to have 20 candidates, including Ashley Moody, who was just endorsed by slick Ric Flair just yesterday? Woo,
oh my gosh, Ric Flair.
He endorsed Ashley Moody. So,
did he really?
He did. It was posted on his Instagram, and he is the dirtiest player in the game. So he can help somehow with some ads.
I was looking. There's a big marijuana conference, an annual conference called Benzinga. And I saw that Ric Flair was one of the keynotes or big people who was attending that. It was going to be featured there.
I tell you, I mark out to meet Ric Flair. That's kind of cool. So, I mean, come on, legend in my youth. So, and beyond the youth, he's been around for so long. But you're going to see a very crowded field. Byron Donalds and all these Republicans will jump in, and it'll sort itself out. And that's one thing Republicans have. The Democrats don't, a very deep bench, but that's not always a great thing because now you've got all these competitive primaries where
Wilton Simpson, you forgot Wilton Simpson.
Wilton Simpson, yeah, and they have resources, but they're all going to blast away at each other, and that could give Democrats an opening. But yeah, like I said, it's you got to draw an inside straight here, and it's not impossible. You have states that are redder than Florida that elect Democrats as governor. Look at Kentucky, Louisiana. These states are much more Republican than we are, and you have Democrats leading the way. It just has to be the right moment, the right candidate, and we'll see if we get there. It's going to be tough.
We'll see. I have to say I'm skeptical. I know you're on a short time frame here. I have 2 more questions I wanted to ask you about. One is about Andrew Warren, who is running for re-election. He's a state attorney in the 13th Judicial Circuit. I do know that one. Over in Hillsborough County, the 11th, it's been an interesting legal kind of trail. Have you been following all the ins and outs of that?
Yes. I think that Andrew will prevail now that the 11th Circuit Court of Appeal overturned the district court's ruling, and I think ultimately he'll be restored to office, but the time's a wasting. I mean, if he doesn't win this election, he can't be restored after November. So I think, though, if they decide the the case before the November election, he'd be restored to office. But the courts are dragging their feet. I think politically, it's not a gimme that he gets a seat back, because there's an incumbent there who's retained some support. And
Well,
I
the
think
incumbent was appointed by Governor DeSantis, the governor who suspended Andrew Warren, also appointed Susie Lopez, and that's who she. So now she's the incumbent, and she is seeking election. I guess it's not really re-election, right?
Yes, Susan Lopez is a former judge, and she is an incumbent now, and so it's going to be. It's not as easy to regain your seat back when you're running against someone who has established relationships and built a reputation there. It'll be easier, I think, in Orlando for Monique Worrell to win her seat back, because she's running against Andrew Bain, who is now running for the seat as an independent. And someone should tell him that NPAs, they should tell him that people love independent-minded people. They just don't like voting for them.
Yeah.
Independents don't get elected to office. So I think she has a really good chance of winning her seat back. And I think she'll win her court case against the governor, just like I think Andrew's going to win his court case if this ever goes before the election.
Right.
But Andrew is popular as state attorney. He was reelected. It's just that now he's running against an incumbent, and so it's harder for me to handicap that race. I can tell you, I think Monique is going to win in Orlando.
Interesting. Okay, well, you heard it here first. The last question I want to ask you about is the Israel protests, the protests about Israel and Palestine on campus. What's been going on down there at FAU? Any dust ups, any arrests, anything like any prosecutions?
We had one matter where an anti-Israel protester got violent and was arrested for violence against a police officer, and so that's pending. But as far as others, we have not seen here what we've seen in other places, and I think part of that is that you have a strong law enforcement response. You've got strong laws on the books, and you have prosecutors who do our jobs and don't look the other way. There is no place for violence. There's no place for bigotry and anti-Semitism on our campuses. You can protest all you want in a peaceful way. You start calling for the death of Jews, you're going to be in trouble. And you start blocking our roads, you're going to be dragged out and you're going to be prosecuted. We don't put up with that like other communities do. And I think that's one of the reasons why you don't see here what you see in other places.
It's a balance, though, isn't it? Allowing students to have the freedom of expression, and you want them to be interested and involved. Look, I mean, this is, my friends and I talk about this at night. We spent hours kind of gnashing our teeth about this because obviously, we support Israel. My family are Holocaust survivors. Some of them did not survive. So how do you balance your support for Israel and your abhorrence of anti-Semitism and still allow these students to be able to express themselves? And also, Dave, I wonder how much of this, how many outside people are influencing with these tents and I really have a lot of suspicion about that.
Oh yeah, this is a well-funded operation from the outside with the tents looking the same.
Right.
It's funded, and it's not a grassroots movement for the most part, and there are a lot of students who get caught up in it. And look, they're allowed to express their views if they want to say free Palestine, whatever that means. I think I agree, actually, free Palestine from Hamas. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But, if they want to express their views, even though most of them probably couldn't find Gaza on a map and just discovered this issue 6 months ago, they're allowed. They're allowed to do that. But when you start harassing people and threatening people and calling for the death of others, or block our roads and our airports, that's action. That's not speech by itself. And as such, you're going to be held accountable for it. So that's the difference. Peaceful protest is very American, and we should respect it. But when it goes beyond that, that's when we need to take action. And I think actually we have struck the right balance here in Florida.
And I think, there's no place for Jewish students being intimidated and harassed and fearful on campus, especially in Florida, where I think we have like the largest. I don't know, but I just really no place for it.
Yes, exactly. Agreed, Dara. And I'm sorry that I have to run to my next thing, but I really enjoyed.
Well,
being
thank
on
you
with
for coming back. Thank you for coming back. We'll catch you up soon, and we'll talk about your predictions later. But hopefully, we'll catch up with you on the Trump stuff before then. Thanks again, Dave Aronberg.
Thank you, Dara.
Bye-bye.
Bye. You take care.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida.